Welcome to the third episode of the Maverick Banking Edge podcast series hosted by P. Venkatesh, Director, Thought Leadership, Maverick Systems. Today, joining him, we have two CX experts, Asuthosh and Annette, joining us for this fascinating conversation around hyper-personalization for the wealth management space in the banking industry.
Annette, if I could go with you, I really wanted to ask you what made you choose this topic and why do you think this report is relevant at this point in time?
Yeah, it's a great question, really. I mean, the topic of customer experience is always an important one. That's why we're in business, for our customers. And so, the customer experience really never sits still. Customer preferences and expectations change. So we have to evolve the business really to keep up with those expectations. I think that there is research out there that says that, your last experience is really the one that customers remember, and we've got to make sure those are all great experiences. I think that constantly raises the bar on how the experience is going to be, and that really changes how brands need to focus on those expectations and really think about not just the competition within their own industry, but other industries and what other industries are doing. And so I think this is a great time for this report to get out there. That's one of the reasons, right? And I think it's also, imperative that brands really understand who their customers are, what problems they're trying to solve, where they are in their journeys, so that we can help them, solve their problems, meet their expectations, meet them where they are, personalize the experience, deliver the experience that customers are expecting and desire. So I think this report will certainly help to point, the readers in that direction without a doubt. Expectations for today for the experience are, the experience has to be consistent, it's got to be personalized, it's got to be seamless and frictionless, relevant, timely. And I think that this report, again, will really help to deliver on that for brands today as they read through it and really, understand the framework, take it to heart, and put it to good use.
Very nice, very nice. Annette, see, if I may have to ask you, customer experience has been the focus of many verticals, including banking, for a long period of time. But we are not seeing much in action, which has resulted in the customer's delight.
Yes.
Now, what would be, in your view, the key takeaways from this report for the C-level people to put that into action?
Yeah. I think there are three key takeaways from this report. I think that, and executives in these companies know this, there are challenges in wealth management when it comes to the customer experience, right? The industry faces challenges in delivering that personalization that customers are expecting. And part of that is because there are no tailored frameworks, and there's complex personas, there's issues with data, privacy, and the journeys are pretty intricate for your clients. So I think that's really important. Second part, I just mentioned it, is a need for that coherent framework, right? There is no framework out there, and so we need this industry-wide framework to bridge the gap and to provide individualized financial services that build trust. They deepen the client relationship, and they really enhance satisfaction and loyalty for your clients. And then I think the third thing is something that we definitely touch on in this framework too, is around the opportunity around hyper-personalization. The industry is really moving toward that, and it's really about personalizing experience for each individual client at scale. And so this is a big undertaking, but it also offers significant opportunities for an organization to deliver the experience that customers are expecting.
Very nice again. And Ashutosh, if I were to turn to you, see, the entire paper is on the intersection of wealth and personalization. And I really wanted to first start with what, in your view, are the major hurdles, issues, and constraints that the wealth management firms face today while implementing personalization?
Of course, I mean, Annette, in a way, already summarized why personalization is a must-have now. It's no more a good-to-have. And despite that, as you rightly said, we don't see as many implementations, right? So there have to be some hurdles because of which we don't see them effectively being implemented everywhere. But it's been a fascinating journey over a decade, from having a focus on target market to a focus on target segment to a focus on target persona to now a target of one. So clearly technology is no more a hurdle. We have enough and more technologies and platforms available which allow us to actually target a unique individual customer by its triggers, motivations, behavioral attributes, what you will, right? Change management is no more a hurdle. COVID-19 kind of completely destroyed that hurdle, if I may use that word. So the key hurdles that I see, four of them. The first one is very specific to wealth management. I mean, all those who have been in wealth management would know that the sheer multitude of product, customer segment, customer persona, and journey stage considerations that need to be worked out to figure out for whom to personalize the experience, what to personalize, and how to personalize. That complexity comes in when we start talking about all these combinations at once. And without a right prioritization and focus, it becomes a very inefficient and ineffective exercise. And on top of that, on the other side, there is this challenge of quantifying the impact or outcome from the personalization program. So unless we have a dollar outcome in our minds, at least in terms of forecast or possibility, it's very difficult to marry, a practical aspect of implementation in terms of cost and outcome to the actual roadmap, right? So this focus on efficiency and effectiveness isn't possible without, one, the framework, as Annette mentioned, and also without the visibility into the ROI and prioritization and focus. And then along with these two, there are some tactical challenges, like data silos exist across the organization, and unless you bring all the functional leadership into the common alignment frame of sorts, have them aligned on the common impact of the personalization, these data silos would be difficult to break. And again, for that, we need quantified ROI, visibility, or outcome possibility in some way worked out. And I feel because of these specific challenges, it's very difficult to implement a personalization program. And even if you do, right now, I've seen that the average implementation tenure is around 18 to 24 months, which is such a long tenure that it just becomes ineffective without having these questions answered. That's what I feel.
See, Asutosh, then I really need to ask you, and it mentioned that there was no framework ready for use on the one side, and you mentioned there are technology challenges in terms of siloed data, as well as the complexity of dealing with wealthy customers who have their own unique preferences, and therefore capturing them has its own challenges. I wanted to ask you, does that framework provide both with regard to how to identify the persona and their uniqueness with regard to high net worth investors, as well as in terms of how to capture the data from siloed systems, almost all the challenges which you mentioned, in a way that it is ready and good to go to work with for the CX professionals in wealth management industry?
I love the question, PV, because the answer is an emphatic yes on all the questions you raised, right? All the sub questions you raised. In fact, that's why I highlighted the constraints in as many details as possible, because yes, the framework does address each and every question you raised, and rightly raised. Because first things first, our framework helps address the issue of prioritization and focus. When you have these multitudes of product, customer segment, persona, and journey stage combinations at play, our framework gives a very simple, business centric, outcome centric model of prioritizing and focusing on very specific products, segments, personas, and journey stages which when personalized, leveraged for personalization, will drive the maximum impact. So you will see that when me and Annette, we talk about this framework, we always talk about the impact. We always talk about real world problem solving rather than a good to have. Let's have personalization, right? That's not our story. Our story is let's have personalization for a specific outcome. So the first thing our framework addresses is the priority and focus. The second thing that our framework also does is we do recommend that there needs to be a very strong consultative deep dive on persona mapping, journey mapping, which is an essential pre-work. But a lot of times, unless you see the possibility or see things at play, it's difficult to invest or deep dive, right? So what our framework also does is gives a sense of mapping, standard baseline based, best practice based mapping of ideal personas, ideal journeys, ideal journey stages and considerations, so that you have something ready-made to start playing with, and which you can of course deep dive further. Third, we also give you personalization possibilities. So we have a framework where we say, hey, rather than you be completely creative with the personalization possibilities ground up, we'll give you certain personalization possibilities which are mapped to personas. And when I say personas, I just don't mean the demographic attributes of these personas, but rather the behavioral attributes, the gender specificities, and a lot more deep dive, for coming up with these personalization possibilities. And lastly, it also gives you a sense of crawl, walk, run approach to implementation, wherein we say that implement it in a phased manner, where the first phase, because it would deliver a quantified outcome, it kind of would pay for the subsequent investments on subsequent phases, right? So it is self-sustained once you initiate this. So net, it's a decent model focused on quantified outcome, with a very deep dive mapping of possibilities to all these specificities, product persona, journey stage, and so on. And lastly, data silo, to in a way be specific about the question. The question is not whether data silo is a technological challenge. Frankly, it is not, because we have platforms and technologies that allow for data integration and customer 360 view. The challenge is functional alignment in breaking those silos, because a lot of functional leaders, for right reasons, want to own up the data specific to the functions and not really share it across unless there's merit in doing so. And our framework kind of helps visualize how breaking the data silos would deliver impact aligned to the individual KRA KPIs of the functions. And then the conversation is easier for any CX leader who's going to talk to a sales leader, for example, rather than saying, hey, we are going to improve your CSAT and NPS. Here, someone's going to say, hey, we are going to improve your AUM. And the moment you talk about AUM, the functional leaders would hear you, would talk about, hey, let's do this, right? So data silos is also a lot about aligning KRA KPIs, which our framework allows for, and has structured step-by-step approach to deliver that.
See, Ashutosh, you touched upon many things. And I really think that are you indicating that there is a customer experience playbook that we have given, which will aid not only in executing CX programs, but also culturally making those relevant changes like what Annette mentioned. It is a cultural factor, which is a very critical factor.
Yes.
And further, Ashutosh, one aspect which you mentioned in the constraint was about the project duration being 18 to 24 months. Do you think with this framework it will come further down?
Right. Well, firstly, very rightly summarized, PV. My long answer you kind of summarized succinctly within 1 or 2 lines. So kudos to you, PV. Yes, our framework does address or deliver a sense of CX playbook. But let me be honest, I don't want to be someone saying there's magic at play here. Our framework does call out realistic kind of recommendations on having consultative interventions for deep dive, that none of this is possible without the right pre-work on journey mapping, persona mapping, and so on. But what we definitely do deliver is, a step-by-step approach to achieve this, and building a rationale towards the investments that are necessary, effort-wise or cost-wise. And in terms of the duration, PV, the actual duration has a lot of implications in terms of what is the readiness of the organization for the implementation, whether it is in terms of technology, availability of technologies and platforms, rather a prior investment in those, data quality, data integration, data processing, approvals, and whatnot. So there is a lot of pre-work, infrastructure, culture, change management, program management wise that needs to happen before one can say personalization can now be implemented. And then depending on the maturity of the organization, the duration would change. But what we have seen that, with the framework, because we kind of impact the planning, ideation, and design phases as well for these programs, we see that the duration can be brought down by 40 to 60%. That's a possibility that we definitely preempt with the use of framework. And we, in the case illustration that we have documented in the paper, we have shown that how we can actually deliver, close to $1.13 million of AUM within 8 to 12 months of implementation. So there is definitely a possibility of 40 to 60% reduction.
So that is a substantive reduction, and with a 1 year ROI, it makes it much more worthwhile to look into by both the business and the technology professionals inside the bank. See, if that be the case, then I will turn to Annette. What would be your own advice on its adoption by the wealth management firms?
This is the same advice that I would give to anybody. And I think it would also directly impact, the 40 to 60% reduction that Ashutosh was talking about. There really are a couple of key foundational factors or elements that have to be in place when you're doing this type of work, right? And I'll just summarize them, and I'll go in a little bit more detail. But we need leadership, commitment, and alignment, and we need a customer-centric culture. I think that's really at the core of the main things that we need in order to get adoption and get that reduction in time that Ashutosh is talking about. So if I talk about leadership, commitment, and alignment, so being a customer-centric organization really takes a commitment from the top down, right? There's a mindset shift, there's a behavior shift in how we do everything. And that commitment is also for investments. It's financial, it's human, it's any resources and technology, those kinds of things will need the commitment of your leadership, right? It also, we're also talking about alignment, and that basically means that we need everybody in the organization, every leader in the organization to be on board, right? We need every channel, every department, every business unit leader thinking and doing exactly the same thing to build out this customer-centric organization. And I think also that addresses one of the issues that Ashutosh mentioned, which is silos. If we have everybody aligned and working together, a customer-centric culture is one that is by definition collaborative. And if everybody's aligned, we're all wanting to share data and information and all working toward, the same goals and the same vision and the same objectives, across the board, across the organization. So I think that's really important. And I've mentioned customer-centric culture. Obviously, culture was the second thing that I talked about. And I think that customer-centric is the way to go, right? And it really means that there are no discussions, no decisions, no designs without bringing that customer and her voice into them, right? Without asking, how is what we're doing going to impact the customer? How is it going to make her feel? What problems are we going to help her solve? And what value will we create and deliver for her? So this is really an essential foundational element in order for everything that we're proposing in this report to work and to be adopted. So I think those are two really critical elements that we've got to consider. So leadership, commitment, and alignment around the goals, and then building out this customer-centric culture, and it's very deliberately designed to be that way. And that should make everybody's job easier, right? If you have a culture that's centered on the customer and there's never any doubt about why we're doing what we're doing, then that certainly pushes the initiative and pushes this work further ahead. And to Ashutosh's point, helps to cut that time back to by 40 to 60%.
See, Annette, in which case, if it has those foundational elements of ushering in a customer-centric culture, as well as giving a good playbook for you to execute CX program,
right?
Do you think that it is adaptable by other segments of banking, especially retail and corporate as well, even
Yes.
though this is focused on wealth?
Yes, absolutely. It certainly is. We would tweak some of the things because the current report and the current framework are very specific to the wealth management personas. But other than that, we would propose other personas to help you get started, and certainly would advocate for you to, build out your own personas. But yes, absolutely. To answer your question, yes.
Okay, thanks. See, now turning to Ashutosh, if Annette has given what should be the C-level agenda to take it forward, what would be your advice to the operational team for managing this framework?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question now, right? Because implementation is the key. Otherwise, it's all talk without achieving nothing. It starts with the pre-work. PV, I strongly advise a huge focus and investment, time, energy, effort on pre-work. A lot of what Annette mentioned is essential pre-work. Building the customer-centric culture, cross-functional alignment, governance, leadership alignment, and prioritization of this program. All of this is essential pre-work, but operationally, there are some additional elements to the pre-work, which again include consultative interventions on persona mapping, journey mapping, ROI mapping, and visualization or quantification. So these are essential pre-works, because once these are in place, you kind of get to answer a lot of problems to get the leadership aligned, get the budgets approved, get the cross-functional team aligned, and so on. And subsequently, the second part would be a sense of cross-functional governance team, because this program cannot exist in silo. The execution could be technology focused, but then inputs to that and the outcomes from that need to be worked out collaboratively. That's the key word which Annette also highlighted and gave us, right? So it's a collaborative program, and hence having a cross-functional governance team with sponsorships and advocates from each individual functions would be a great start, because then you would have the people to kind of drive the narrative and agenda that the program works out on. So essential pre-work would be these two. And then there is data management and platform management. The key focus for personalization comes from a customer 360 data view, which is where you would want to bring in data from your siloed systems, whether it is CRM, CMS, robo-advisors, chatbots, marketing automation platform, and what you will. Kind of assimilate the data, integrate the data, process the data, possibly use AI, ML analytics, and then put those out into BI, a business intelligence report for management view and dashboards. So all of this needs a very strong data management and tech and platform management, which would be the second pivot or the second pillar for that. And the third, often which is missed out in such programs, PV, is people think that this is a burst intervention, that you implement it and you're done. But Annette, when she started with the conversation, she mentioned that we live in a far more dynamic world where things change every now and then, which means that this program would be a dynamic program as well, that there will be changes based on the changes to the market, to the segment, to the product, to the industry, and so on. So there needs to be a sense of CI/CD, continuous improvement and continuous development, built into the program. So as in how the program is implemented and evolves, There needs to be a market input, segment input, persona input coming in, factored in, changes to be done, and then implemented, and the cycle to continue. So CI/CD being an essential part. These three pillars, if they are thought through and worked out correctly, I see no reason why this would lead to quantified outcomes. Quite positive on that.
So that is a great framework by itself, Asutosh, the three-pillar framework. And I wanted to ask you, I heard there were two fundamental parts. One is the foundational parts, which makes it easier to go through this program. And the second is an operational part, which you do it subsequently. Now, in this framework, does it support both? Does it also support, do you have technology identified which could go to support both the components?
Yes, I would say that there would be a possibility for round two where we deep dive on hyper-personalization that Annette mentioned, and also deep dive on technologies and platforms. But our framework does at the end summarize the platforms and technologies that are available today to help execute or implement all the things that we are listing as possibilities from the framework. And also the right way of leveraging all the tech and platforms together. Not to forget that not all technologies and platforms are needed at once to drive the personalization. It depends on the possibilities themselves. For example, if you're going to talk about the campaign and content personalization, then we don't need as much of platform intervention rather than the actual content intervention itself. But it depends on the possibilities and the priorities and the focuses that we have worked out to kind of choose which platforms and technologies need to be worked out. But to summarize, yes, on one side, there'll be platforms like CRM, CMS, marketing automation, CDP, customer data platform for data integration, and so on. There'll be technologies like AI, ML, analytics, and tools like BI, robo-advisors, chatbots, and so on. All of those which are available today, it's just that which ones to use, when and how, which would drive the impact positively. And the framework does summarize a lot of what I mentioned in detail at the end.
Thanks, Asutosh. You are essentially saying that the industry is all set to go to execute.
Yes.
The only thing is at which level they are in, both with regard to culture as well as the technology platforms for the readiness to go to execute. Very nice. Asutosh, if it is so critical, Annette, I wanted to ask you, are there some fundamental structural changes that the firms need to do in order to get the full value of going to implement CX programs?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the keys is one of the things that I mentioned is the culture. The customer-centric culture is really going to be critical to, success in implementing any type of customer experience initiative. But I think there are a couple of different ways that we can look at some of these things that are required, right? So if we step back for a minute and we think about the employees and the employee piece, right, we need to have that team in place that's going to, execute and guide the implementation of, use the data and guide the implementation, use the framework and to, guide the implementation for sure. There are going to be, there's going to be the training and the education and making sure that the employees have the resources and the tools and everything that they need to do their jobs and to do them differently, because we're going to also need the right data to inform how they're going to now, interact with customers or inform how the technology. And then again, now you're going to need the right technology as well to use that, whether it's journey orchestration or it's your communications or whatever it is. So you're going to need the right people. You're going to need the right data. You're going to need the right tools. You're going to need the right culture, and you're going to need the right training and education for your employees. You're also going to need, so think about, that's the employee piece, and then think about the program management piece, right? There are some critical pieces that will fall into that. So you're going to need a change management approach. This is certainly a change for your organization and how you do things. And so you're going to need to identify your change management approach. You're going to need to embrace an agile experimenting and continuous improvement environment, right? I mean, these are all things that are going to have to be okay as you go through and manage this work. You're going to need a governance structure, and which are, you know, the committees that will lend oversight and execute. And then you're also going to need governance in terms of the operating model. What are the people, data, tools, systems, processes that are going to be needed and used to, as you go through this transformation and you deliver an entirely new experience for your customers. You're also going to want to think about the metrics. How are we going to measure where we are, monitoring, you know, overall performance? What does success look like, right? And how are we going to link this work to business outcomes? This is going to be really an important part of that. And then finally, the last bucket that I would talk about in terms of things that we need to think about as we implement this is obviously our clients or our customers, right? How are we going to communicate with them? How are we going to train them and teach them and reset expectations, because the experience is changing? And so if we're going to change the experience, we need to let them know so that they aren't frustrated, that they aren't met with, oh goodness, what, things are different than they used to be, right? So let's make sure that we educate and train and communicate with our customers so that their expectations are reset. Anytime we change the experience, we want to reset those expectations, right? So I think that's an important thing to consider. So those are sort of three buckets. There may be more, but those are sort of three primary buckets of things that we need to focus on as we think about what are some of the, you know, structural changes that need to be made in order to use and implement this framework and be successful at it.
Thank you so much, both Annette and Ashutosh, for not only being on this podcast, but also co-working with us in creating that framework. And I hope the industry benefits from that. And I'm really looking forward to getting the first implementation on this framework.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. And we've absolutely enjoyed working together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ashutosh, any closing remarks from you?
No, so first of all, it was lovely working with all of you on the framework, and I am excited about how the first implementation went and how it goes. I'm very positive about the outcomes and looking forward. Yeah, just let us know when that first call comes.
Most certainly, Ashutosh. Most certainly. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us.